Today I learned creative messaging and content, and the three questions is to ask to understand creative messaging. I also watched a video about creative messaging and what it is, and it gave me different examples of different brands in real life, like McDonald's. For example, their brand messaging is "I'm loving it," and Nike is "Just do it." And what it is essentially is it's short slogans like "Just do it" from Nike, "I'm loving it" from McDonald's, and all sort of different brand messaging. And it is very important because it gives you a competitive edge to stand out, essentially. Like, think of it like you have a small business, okay? Imagine this. And you have a logo. But if you don't have a brand message or brand messaging and a clear message to the world, then it's just going to be a logo without any significance and no meaning at all, right? So that's what I learned today. That is super important for marketing, having a clear creative messaging and content around that messaging. And why have this? Well, very, very basic is to basically stand out, right? That's what I learned today. And my take on this is that if I have a logo, this is my take. If I have a logo and I don't have any creative messaging, then that's just a logo, right? Then the questions to ask to kind of like get a creative messaging or create a creative messaging is what makes my brand stand out from the rest? How can I communicate effectively to my target audience? And how can I leverage powerful key messages to foster, like to create loyalty, right? And that's the three questions that are needed to be asked to create a compelling creative messaging, and that is what I learned today. Okay, then I listened to a podcast about two people who were talking back and forth about kind of, for the majority of the podcast, it was basically yap, not gonna lie. I listened to the podcast, and they were basically talking about why it's good to hire a professional when like a professional consultant when trying to grow your business. But in the beginning, at least, they talked a little bit about creative messaging, and they said, let me check my notes here a bit. They said that you need to start with language. Start with language, like create a message first, and then go on the design. Because if you go in the design part, then it's not gonna end good, because you're not gonna have any ideas, because you're not gonna have any messaging in your head. You're not gonna have a language in your head. And how are you gonna create a language? How are you gonna create a message if you don't have? No, how are you gonna create a design if you don't have any language use or choice and message of choice in your head? It's going to be impossible, or you're going to have to select from a lot of different choices because you don't have any messaging in your head. So start with language. That's what I learned primarily from this podcast. And yeah, the benefits basically from creating a creative messaging and content around this creative messaging that aligns with the creative messaging is that it helps customers understand your brand. All right, that's very basic, okay? And like what unique, and it helps also the customers know like what unique benefits do your brand provide, right? And I'm gonna read a bit off of my notes here now. And I also did, in the end, after listening to this podcast, I did kind of a reading or like kind of activity. So I either do reading or I do an activity for like kind of digesting all this and to actually see if I've learned it. And today I did an activity and not reading part. So the activity was a campaign brief of two brands. And a campaign brief, from what I Googled on the internet, it is basically a kind of a summary to help others understand what your brand is all about, like just in general, so they can understand and like kind of get an idea, right? And I did this campaign brief of two brands for first Allbirds and then Glossier. And for Allbirds, their brand name is Allbirds. Then the key message is better shoes in a better way. Basically, they're selling really like eco-friendly shoes and out of, you know, eco-friendly eco-friendly shoes out of eco-friendly materials, basically. And their target audience is environmentally conscious consumers. And positioning, basically how they're different or differentiation in the market. Again, this positioning comes from the days earlier learning, right? So it's very important you do this in chronological way and in a right order, so you understand these terms, because they're gonna come terms and terminology, words that you're gonna have to know because you are supposed to learn this in the past days, right? And this applies to everything you do in life. But yeah, let's get back to what I did today for learning this high income skill to leverage it later to monetize it. So for the positioning part, as I was saying, their positioning, how they're like trying to be different, this brand Allbirds, is they are having an eco-friendly and design and comfort using sustainable natural materials for creating their shoes, okay, their footwear, right? And their tone is an honest, down-to-earth, and inspiring. Because they want to inspire the other people to be like them, right? To create materials eco-friendly and not, you know, plastic and not polluting the globe. And the channel they're using is Instagram Reels, TikTok, and some, I think I saw some blog posts also. And then moving on to this other brand, Glossier, a campaign brief, very brief, is their brand is called Glossier, and the key message is skin first, makeup second, and smile always. And I think that's a pretty good key message. And their target audience, now I love their target audience. I really love this. And I think at least it is women like who are frustrated with like unrealistic beauty standards.